Hello and welcome to Mindset Mondays with DTK. This is episode 60. Mindset Mondays is an ongoing series of live broadcasts designed for folk with the growth mindset or those who'd like to develop one. And it's a great place to play with new ideas, new concepts, and try on new mindsets. So if you'll take a quick moment and click share right below the video and share this video with your friends in your community and invite them to join the conversation. All right, so since it is April Fool's Day, and by the way, sitting watching San Diego Harbor as a battleship goes through, it is just an exquisite view. So it's the first time in San Diego, and if I could have the scene behind me and not vanish, I would. It's stunning. So here's the playground today. Let me slide this away so you can see it. Here we go. The first principle is that you must not fool yourself. You are the easiest person to fool. Look, for me, when I want something enough, when I crave it enough, I can, like all of us can, ignore the obvious evidence against that. Right? We're really good at fooling ourselves. That probably captures the reasons we don't date people that are the best for us, or we don't take a job that's the best for us, or we act in ways that we believe are aligned with what we want, and yet ignore all the evidence against it. With someone else, we might play the skeptic, right? But when counseling ourselves, when looking at what we want, we trust our own judgment a little more blindly. Humans are evidence collecting machines. Once we decide something's true, we see the world through a lens where every bit of evidence that we collect supports it. Right? If that same flawed logic that we use to make something real and true for ourselves, if we were applying it to someone else, if we were watching a situation with someone else, we'd be more likely to test it, to question it, to test the validity. But when it's ourselves, it's easier just to keep plowing forward. So obviously this came up to me for this week because of the Fool tie-in for April Fool's Day. And I'm curious, where are the places where you fool yourself, or you let yourself believe things that aren't true, where you convinced yourself that the path is right, the decision is right, the choice is right, when it's not? Where are the places where confirmation bias gets you? It's important that we filter when we have 60,000 discrete thoughts in a given day. That's a huge amount to filter. And so as it is, we have to pick apart what's true from what's not. And it's not just the volume, it's what are the persistent ideas. Spent a very long time convincing myself I knew what I was doing with the way we were building the team at my last company, and that we were hiring the right people. And when we had somebody working for us that wasn't the right fit, I was very good at convincing myself, yes, it's easier to work around those gaps than let them go and hire somebody else that was a better fit, or staying on the wrong path on a project. I was superb at that. I convinced myself because it was easier to stick with the devil that I knew than make the effort to change it. And I would defend those foolish decisions to the end at the time. And it wasn't until an inflection point was hit And, why the hell do I wait for it to be in my face instead of testing the evidence, testing the assumptions? I think that's the opportunity, is to test along the way, good, bad, ugly, to be objective, to take a clean assessment. And Bill, that's really true for me as well. When there's a deadline, when there's a crush, when there's a crunch, testing flies out the window. Going when it comes with a deadline, it's amazing how much more flawed my judgment can be. So I'm sitting here with Elaine, sort of waiting for a reaction to that one. Just trying to figure out how to respond on Facebook. Come here. The option, when there's a deadline, when there's a crush, when there's a crunch, the adrenaline picks up, and I'm like, hey, I don't need more detail. No, I'm just going to plow ahead. And then I will continue to support that decision made in haste, regardless of all evidence that says it was a bad call. And it's fascinating. I wait till there's an inflection point to change my willingness to test. Yeah, and that may be it, that I've wanted to be on the path, and even if the decision is wrong, I wanted to, so I'm going to stay. I don't like to be wrong. I really don't like to be wrong. And if I test the decision and realize that I'm wrong, then I have to not only change, I have to admit that I was wrong. And sometimes it's easier to suck it up and ignore what's flamingly apparent. You ever made a decision where everybody says, God, we all saw that? Yeah, instead of ripping off the Band-Aid and changing tack, how often do, the short-term pain and discomfort to get onto something better, how often do we just sit with the long-term suffering? Staying in that job that you hate because it's less effort to die a little bit every time you walk into that office than it is to change. It's like only when the pain of the status quo outstrips the fear of the change, or the perceived effort of the change, does change ever happen. Only when the pain of the status quo outstrips the fear of the change do we lean into change. We're stubborn creatures. Yeah. And it's not just the big things, it's even little things. Yeah, Lane's not typing, so she's commenting this way. Say it again. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's the things we include in our lives, whether it's the things we eat, the things we drink, the activity we engage in or don't engage in, and the people that we surround ourselves with. The houses we live in. The ongoing low level of discomfort is preferable to the intensity and the effort, or even the agony of the change. And so we just let that level of discomfort stay. And then they combine and combine and combine and combine. Yeah. So this goes back to 4 agreements. What Elaine is saying is be impeccable with your word. It's easy for us to look at somebody else and say, wow, they're in a crappy situation. Why don't they change it? As opposed to, hey, what's the situation I'm in? Test it. and be honest. Be impeccable with your word. Look at everything. Test everything. Test your assumptions. Test your beliefs. Test your thoughts. Test what you hold as fact. Fact is a fascinating idea. It was for 400 years we believed with certainty that the sun moved around the earth and the earth was the center of the universe. Oops. For centuries we believed that the earth was flat, despite the fact that some people still do, shockingly. That for hundreds of years we believed that the earth was flat. There are things we hold as fact, and they're not. And unless we test the things we hold as true, we limit our ability to change. In sales for a very, very long time, and during a sales training, one of the things we were taught was salespeople are the easiest people to sell to. We have a confirmation bias. We teach ourselves to believe things that are easier to believe. So the opportunity for this week, and I'm looking at a really exciting week. I've got a couple more days of play with Elaine, and then 4 days of an intensive in a room with 150 coaches. So this is going to be a really intriguing, interesting, rich playground of ideas and testing thoughts and testing concepts. So for this week, I think the playground is test everything. First principle is that you must not fool yourself. You are the easiest person to fool. So take that moment, back to Marsha Reynolds and the idea of reflective intelligence. Take that moment, take that intentional pause to reflect, to feel about what you're feeling about, to think about what you're thinking about, to assess and to test. So between now and next Monday, what mindset will you choose?